Hi, everybody. Ian Bremmer, and a quick take for you. Elon Musk versus Donald Trump. A huge public fight. The richest man in the world, most influential advisor, most access over the first 3, 4, 5 months of the Trump administration, and the president of the United States. It's must-see TV. It's even bigger and better than the German chancellor visiting the White House and the first phone call Trump asking for and finally getting a phone call directly with Xi Jinping, the first time those two leaders have spoken since the inauguration. But that's not what we're talking about, of course. It's super dysfunctional, but what isn't around U.S. politics, and it also does matter. First big point, the policy point, is that the big, beautiful bill, this massive tax cut extension and spending expansion, as a consequence, massive addition to the deficit, more border security, some cuts from budgetary spending that Elon really doesn't like, and in some ways ostensibly started the public fight, though there are deeper reasons for it, of course. That bill is still going forward. Doesn't really matter that Elon doesn't like it. There are really no fiscal hawks left in Congress. Everybody likes adding to the deficit, gives them more goodies, more pork. That is what drives the U.S. government as a consequence, and especially with Elon out, and he was, the cost cutter in chief, if you will, internally, though nothing like the initial $2 trillion and then $1 trillion that he promised when he first was given or bought that position. But we're looking at spending more money, and there's nothing new there for the United States over the past decades. And so that's still going to pass, and there will be some jockeying around, sort of how you align the House and the Senate bill. But, 95% of what's in the House bill is going to go through. And no, you aren't going to see large numbers of GOP members of the Senate or House that come out on principle in opposition to it. So Elon standing against that and blowing up his relationship, at least temporarily, with Trump does not affect that bill. So then more broadly, what happened here? Trump clearly was willing to spike Elon on the way out in ways that struck me as pretty unnecessary. He had the public meeting and he gave him the gold key and he thanked him, but he also immediately removed the NASA administrator, which, frankly, is a single position that is particularly important to Elon going forward. He's the SpaceX guy. He's the guy that's so tightly intertwined with the U.S. space program. His own company is, frankly, far more important than ultimately what the U.S. government is doing in space. But he relies on those contracts and the security access and all of that, and handpicked the guy that was meant to be the NASA administrator. And then as soon as Trump gets rid of Elon, his 130 days are up, he also gets rid of the NASA administrator. So very clearly, Trump was willing to publicly signal that you no longer have the access that you thought you had and that you paid for, $250 million plus. And then Elon came out and saying that Trump wouldn't have been elected president if it wasn't for Elon. In other words, Elon is more important than Trump. Elon is the one that made it happen, not Trump. It's not that Trump, was almost assassinated and then stood up. It's not that Trump engineered the most extraordinary political comeback in U.S. history when everyone had written him off, including many in his own party, frankly, most, certainly everyone on the Democratic side. He won. And the idea that Elon would have the impertinence publicly to go after the president like that But the president had gone after and spiked the guy that spent more money than anybody else had. And it's sort of, gone and spent all of this time in the White House and in Mar-a-Lago. I mean, for weeks, seemed like he had moved in. And so it was kind of personal. And this is interesting because, of course, Elon has historically been smarter than that. He's more than happy to go after the SEC, but he won't go after Xi Jinping. Never has gone after the Communist Party. In fact, he's been very careful over many years to be very deferential, to be very flattering, and to avoid those fights. And he does that because he understands that Xi is in charge, and that if he were to insult or offend or even give the sort of sense that he's being less than deferential, then that's the end of his business in China. And so the fact that Elon has been capable of doing that for all of these years, while everyone says, how no one can control Elon and he has no filter and he just goes and says whatever he wants, I'd always been skeptical of that. But of course, here, this was much more intense and personal, right? Elon had been spending all of this time and had built what I guess he thought was a relationship of trust with someone who doesn't really have long-term relationships of trust, frankly, in many ways, just like Xi Jinping. So you'd think Elon would know better, but, again, emotions play a role, and it seems like he got caught up in it. And so he came out and attacked Trump pretty strongly in some of the things that he said, like Trump should be impeached. That was a yes in response to someone saying that Trump should be impeached. But that's pretty clear that that's a no-no, and saying that there should be, everyone should be primaried that supports this bill, which, of course, are all of the core Trump supporters in the GOP, that there should be a third party. Now is the time to raise one. I mean, these are all, sort of third rails for President Trump. And it's not like he's incapable of making up. I mean, J.D. Vance certainly has said easily as bad things about Trump historically. I mean, so has half of the cabinet, and they're there right now. So I'm not suggesting that any of this is permanent, but clearly Elon has blown up in a way that one would not have expected, given how careful he has been in previous such situations, again, with the Gulf state leaders and all of that. But he took it personally because he, I guess, thought that the money he had spent, meant that he owned a piece of Trump. And to be fair, the U.S. is far more kleptocratic than any other advanced industrial democracy, and there is a long history of moneyed special interests paying for access to the American president and to senators and to members of the House, and they get a return on that investment. So the idea that only a few months after spending unprecedented amount of money on the president, that Elon was getting kicked to the curb, in the context of all sorts of people paying far less and getting an awful lot, I suspect that struck Elon as incredible ingratitude, which, of course, he wrote about publicly. And, I do think that the scale of the corruption in the U.S. has become staggering for an ostensible representative democracy. And this was, for me, this was not about the Qatari plane. That's the thing that got the most news. Everyone talking about a $400 million plane that couldn't even sell for $250 million, so it wasn't worth that. It might be worth 200 or 150, and we don't even know if it's going to happen. And for now, when it does, it has to be retrofitted, and maybe Trump at some point will use it. And this is chump change compared to Trump coin and Melania coin and the billions of dollars of access and influence, mostly from international sources with far less transparency, going directly into Trump's pocket. So, that's 100 times bigger than the Qatari plane, but since it doesn't have wings, people don't pay attention to it. Elon meeting with Narendra Modi, in the White House and in Blair House right next door, and then journalists asking Trump well, is Elon meeting Modi in his official capacity to advance U.S. policy, or in his business capacity to advance his own personal business? And Trump answers honestly, and he says, I don't know. That's Banana Republic stuff, right? So, and it's also Banana Republic stuff for Trump to threaten to rip up Elon's contracts, billions of dollars of contracts, preferential access, subsidies, which is, core to SpaceX. SpaceX doesn't function as a business if the U.S. taxpayers aren't writing the checks for that. And now Trump's saying Biden should have ripped it up, and here's a big savings, and I'm going to rip it up. Now, are they really going to do that? I doubt it, because there aren't good options. But it's interesting. Trump, at least ostensibly, when he goes after Harvard, when he goes after law firms, he's claiming that there's a legitimate reason for it. That has nothing to do with him personally. It's not a personal grudge. It's not just politics. It's because, Harvard is trafficking in anti-Semitism and they're, promoting DEI. We all know that there's a personal and political fight there, and he's desperate to see the Democrats get on Harvard's side because it will hurt them. But here with Elon, it's very transparent. And that's when the White House says there's always been corruption, but Trump is open about it. That's exactly what we're seeing with Elon, is that Trump is being very, very open, saying, you thought you paid for access, but now you're coming after me. I can shut that access off in a second. That is exactly the way it goes on in authoritarian regimes where, you have to be close to aligned with the political leadership. Rule of law plays no interest. It's rule of man, rule of one man, because the dictator's almost always a man. And that is how you get ahead. And that was what Elon was doing. And he was so shocked and stunned and staggered that his money apparently wasn't enough. Now, again, can they make up, the two of them? Sure. And were bad things said? Yes, but so when the big post that really made everyone go crazy yesterday was Elon saying, well, the reason why they can't put the Epstein files out is because Trump was in them. Now, Trump was in them. Trump has met with Epstein on many occasions. That is publicly known. Of course, he's in the report. So Elon wasn't saying any actual news there. And certainly the DOJ is trying to figure out how best to redact any connections of Trump to Epstein from what they put out, because Trump would find it unacceptable that anything involving him would be in it. That's not the way an independent investigation would go. But it's not an independent investigation. These people were appointed politically to Trump and they're loyal to him, undermining rule of law. But that doesn't mean that Trump is credibly accused or there's any evidence of pedophilia or anything like that. And Elon has accused people directly of pedophilia before who are not pedos. And, this is standard stuff. I think that they can clearly patch it up. And they should, because it is in both of their interests. But it's possible that the narcissism and the anger is too great. It's also possible that the people around Trump that can't stand Elon will throw enough sand in the gears to make it hard. Steve Bannon certainly doing his damnedest to make that happen yesterday, but others too. Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, Stephen Miller, who I think was likely to become National Security Advisor at some point, very close to Trump. These people really don't like Elon. And this is also a core issue, is that there was enormous support for and loyalty to Trump, but the party itself, including inside the administration, is actually incredibly divided. Aside from loyalty to Trump, there's almost nothing that keeps these people together. And so this fight does have the potential to lead to a lot more dysfunction and incompetence internally. And that's a big reason why it is in the interests politically of Trump to find a way to get back with Elon. It's in the interest of Elon economically to find a way back to work with Trump, whether or not the rational thing for those two men ends up being what we're seeing. Of course, that is anyone's guess, and you'll see it live on Twitter. That's it for me, and I'll talk to y'all real soon.